Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the Pied Piper of Pasadena Part 16. This is the story of Dean Corll. In the summer of 1973, 13-year-old James Drala had began taking his recently acquired yellow bike that his parents had just gotten him throughout the neighborhoods of Pasadena in an effort to collect glass bottles to turn in to a convenience store to collect money. Some of y'all may not be familiar with this, but back in the 70s, a way for kids to make or earn money was, back in that time, most soda bottles or milk cartons were made out of glass bottles. And a way for kids to collect money would be collecting these bottles, not just at their homes, but various other residences around town, and turn them in for cash. And this is a way that most kids would earn money other than babysitting or doing newspaper routes in the morning. And James Drala had done this in a way to raise money so he could take his girlfriend to theaters so they could actually watch the new James Bond movie that had just came out. On August 3rd, 1973, 13-year-old James Drala would tell his mother that he wanted to go downtown to collect money for the bottles that he had collected. His mother would tell him that she did not want him riding his bike at dark time, but James Drala would insist and say that he was just going down the road and he would be right back. Once he got into the convenience store, he would pass a windowless white van, and inside it would be Dean Corll and David Brooks. As he was walking by, the men would ask 13-year-old James Drala what he was doing. He would turn around and tell them that he was collecting money from turning in glass bottles, and that is when David Brooks would tell James Drala that he had a few bottles in the back of the van. James Drala would go to the back of the van, open it up, and sure enough, there were some glass bottles. He would collect them and run inside the convenience store. When he walked out, the first thing he would do is run up to the white van to thank Dean Corll and David Brooks. And there they would tell him that they had some larger crates at the house of glass bottles if he would like to get them to collect the money. James Drala would put his bike in the back of the van and would be seen riding off with Dean Corll and David Brooks. Once he was at 2020 Lamar Drive, Dean Corll would order a pizza, and the three of them would sit around the living room and talk for the next 45 minutes eating pizza. Later on that afternoon, James Drala would phone his father and ask if he could stay at a friend's house. His father would tell him that no, he was not staying at a friend's house and that he needed to get home as soon as possible. He would then abruptly hang up the phone. This would be the last time that James Drala's father would ever hear his son's voice. Shortly after that phone call, Dean Corll would mangle 13-year-old James Drala to the torture board, where he would be tortured and sodomized. David Brooks would watch as Dean Corll did this. He would later say in a confession that this torture of 13-year-old James Drala was the most gruesome torture that he had seen in the last 3 years of Dean Corll. He would even go in further details to say that during the torturing of the child, Dean Corll would put on a rubber apron to prevent blood splatter from getting on his clothes. After that, he would be strangled with a nylon cord. And after they killed 13-year-old James Drala, they would wrap him up and take him to the boat shed. And they would place the yellow bike against the wall. By the beginning of August of 1973, the killings that Dean Corll was making, and also making Wayne Henley and David Brooks procure, was becoming more and more frequent, which would add to David Brooks and Wayne Henley's growing paranoia. When they began procuring adolescents for Dean Corll, they were doing about 1 to 2 a month. And by August, they were procuring around 8 a week. And this was making both boys very growingly paranoid that at some point they were going to get caught. It is also said in later confessions that not only David Brooks but Wayne Henley would often talk to each other about what to do with Dean Corll, and would often say that it was getting out of hand and something needed to be done about them. And at various points, they both had made plans to get rid of Dean Coral themselves. On August 15th, 1973, Mary would call Dean Coral, and when he answered the phone, she would ask him when he had planned on coming to Colorado. Dean Coral would respond that he had made plans to be there on September 1st. Mary would then go, "Have you talked to your father?" And Dean Coral would say, "No, I haven't," but had assured Mary that he would tell Arnold before he had left for Colorado. They would soon hang up the phone. This would actually be the last conversation that Mary would ever have with her son. 2 days after this conversation, on August 17th, 1973, Wayne Henley would lure friend Timothy Curley over to 2020 Lamar Drive. Once there, Wayne Henley, Timothy, and Dean Coral would sit around drinking, doing drugs, and huffing paint. At some point in the night, Timothy Curley would tell Wayne Henley that he was hungry and that he would like to get something to eat. And being the fact that Curley was not yet fully intoxicated, Wayne Henley would decide to take him into the car and drive him around to get him something to eat, despite a growingly impatient and frustrated Dean Coral. Once in the car, Wayne Henley would drive Timothy over to his mother's house to where he would hear the noise of two people arguing. This would be their next door neighbors, which would be 15-year-old Rhonda Williams and her father. Rhonda Williams is someone that we have heard about before, but not by name. She is the actual girlfriend of former victim Frank Aguirre. And it is said after the murder of Frank Aguirre, if you remember in the stories, Wayne Henley had actually begged Dean Coral not to kill. But Dean Coral, in fact, did kill Frank Aguirre and would give him that very disturbing revelation. And ever since that crime had been committed, Wayne Henley would become extremely protective of Rhonda Williams, always being there for her. And whenever Rhonda Williams would express interest in continuing looking for her lost boyfriend, Wayne Henley would suggest that she just give up because he's never going to be found, which would make Rhonda Williams think that maybe he knew more than he let on. And once they had heard the argument, Rhonda Williams would confide in Wayne Henley that her father was drunk and had beaten her, and she was trying to get out of the house, and she was also trying to run away. Wayne Henley would also ask Rhonda if she would like to ride with him and Timothy to just get away from her father, which she agreed. Once she had gotten in the car, Wayne Henley would walk inside the house and tell his mother that he was going to be staying the night at Timothy Curley's house. And he would grab some food and then go into the car and start driving around. And this would kind of create a party-like setting for the three teenagers. They would shortly arrive at the house on 2020 Lamar Drive at 3 a.m. on August 18th, 1973. Once pulling into the driving way, Dean Coral would walk outside and notice that Wayne Henley had brought a girl with him. It is said that as they're walking inside, Dean Coral would whisper into Wayne Henley's ear, "You have ruined everything." To which Wayne Henley would tell Dean Coral about the situation of Rhonda and her father, and would say about how he had beaten her and that she just wanted to get out of the house, to which Dean Coral seemed to calm down. They would continue in their party-type setting until they eventually would pass out around 5 a.m., to which Dean Coral would then proceed to bind and gag all three teenagers, taking also a knife out and taking off Timothy Curley's clothes. At some point, Henley would wake up and begin freaking out and trying to beg for his life. Dean Coral would look at him very cold and callously and tell him, "You messed up big time bringing that girl with you. But it's okay. You're all gonna die, and I'm gonna have my fun." He would then walk over to Rhonda Williams' body and begin kicking her in the stomach and the chest, screaming, "Wake up, bitch." As she would wake up, it would be seen dragging Henley into the kitchen, and from the sheer terror of everything going on, she would pass out again. Once in the kitchen, Wayne Henley would beg for his life, not only just telling Dean they had been in each other's lives for 3 years, but that he had also procured all these kids for Dean Coral without being paid once. And it is at this point that Dean Coral would take a knife and cut Henley free.